My family threatened to cut my inheritance unless I married my dad's business partner's daughter. They had no idea I was already making more than them. Hey Reddit, I need to get this off my chest because honestly, I'm still processing everything that's happened over the past few months. This is going to be long, but bear with me because this situation is absolutely insane. So a bit of background. I'm 26 years old, let's call me David. I come from what you'd call a traditional farming family in the Midwest. My dad Henry runs a pretty successful agricultural operation that's been in our family for 3 generations. We grow corn, soybeans, and raise cattle on about 2,000 acres. It's not massive by corporate standards, but it's substantial enough that my family has always been considered well off in our small town. Growing up, it was always assumed I'd take over the farm eventually. My younger sister Claire moved to the city years ago to become a teacher, so I was the natural heir. The thing is, farming never really clicked for me. Don't get me wrong, I respect the work and I understand the business, but I was always more interested in technology and content creation. About 4 years ago, I started a YouTube channel focused on agricultural technology and modern farming techniques. I thought it would just be a hobby, maybe help other young farmers learn about new equipment and methods. What started as videos of me explaining GPS-guided tractors and soil analysis tools slowly evolved into something much bigger. My content began getting traction not just with farmers, but with people interested in sustainable agriculture, food production, and rural life. I started posting on TikTok too, creating shorter content about farming myths, day-in-the-life videos, and educational stuff about where food comes from. Somehow, I managed to hit this sweet spot where both rural and urban audiences were engaged. The crazy part is that I never told my family how successful it was becoming. They knew I made videos, but they thought it was just a silly hobby. My dad Henry would roll his eyes whenever I had to film something, and my mom Melinda would make comments about me wasting time on that computer nonsense, instead of focusing on real work. But here's the kicker. Over the past 2 years, my channels have exploded. I'm talking millions of views, brand sponsorships with agricultural companies, and affiliate marketing deals with equipment manufacturers. I've been making close to $400,000 a year, which is significantly more than our family farm nets annually. But I kept this information to myself because I knew it would complicate things with my family's expectations. Fast forward to about 3 months ago, and this is where things get absolutely bonkers. My dad calls me into his office one evening after dinner, and sitting there with him is Harold Brennan, who owns the largest agricultural supply company in our region. Harold has been doing business with our farm for decades and is essentially my dad's biggest investor and business partner. My dad starts this whole speech about family legacy, tradition, and securing the future of our farm. Then he drops the bombshell. Harold has a daughter named Lauren who just graduated from agricultural business school, and they've essentially arranged for me to marry her. I literally thought he was joking at first. I mean, who does this in 2025? But both my dad and Harold were completely serious. They explained that this marriage would strengthen business ties and ensure the continuity of both our family's agricultural enterprises. Lauren would bring Harold's business connections and capital investment, while I would bring the family farm and its established operations. The worst part was how they presented it. They didn't ask me what I thought about Lauren as a person or whether I was interested in getting married. They talked about her like she was a business asset, her degree, her family connections, her understanding of agricultural economics. It was completely dehumanizing for both of us. I told them I needed time to think about it, which apparently wasn't the answer they wanted to hear. My dad made it very clear that this wasn't really a request. He said the farm was struggling financially more than he'd let on, and Harold's continued investment was crucial for our survival. If I didn't agree to marry Lauren within 6 months, he would remove me from any inheritance and find another way to secure Harold's partnership. The threat hit me hard because, despite everything, this farm represents 4 generations of my family's work. My great-grandfather started with 40 acres during the Depression, and each generation had built it up further. The idea of losing all that history and legacy was devastating. But what really got to me was the manipulation. My dad started bringing up every sacrifice he'd made for the family, every late night working the fields, every risk he'd taken to expand the operation. He made me feel like I owed him my entire future as payment for my upbringing. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. My mom Melinda got involved, talking about how wonderful Lauren was and how this was such a good opportunity for me. They arranged several casual meetings where Lauren and I were thrown together at family dinners or community events. Lauren herself seemed nice enough, but it was clear she was as trapped in this situation as I was. Her conversations always felt forced, like she was trying to sell herself based on her qualifications rather than just being herself. We had nothing in common beyond agricultural backgrounds, and there was zero romantic chemistry between us. The breaking point came about 6 weeks ago when my dad sat me down and said he'd already started talking to Harold about wedding dates. They were thinking a spring ceremony would be perfect timing for the growing season. He handed me a timeline they'd created without my input, outlining engagement announcement, wedding planning milestones, and even honeymoon dates that would work around farm operations. That night, I realized I couldn't keep living this lie. I called a family meeting and told them everything about my YouTube and TikTok success. I showed them my analytics, my revenue reports, my brand partnership contracts. I explained that I was making more money than our family farm had ever generated in its best years. The room went completely silent. My dad's face went through about 5 different emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally something that looked like betrayal. My mom just kept asking why I hadn't told them earlier. I explained that I'd kept it quiet because I knew they'd never take it seriously as a career, and I was right. Even after seeing the numbers, my dad's first reaction was to call it unsustainable and not real work. He said social media was just a fad and I needed to focus on building something lasting. But here's where I finally stood up for myself. I told them that my career was already more financially stable than farming, which is subject to weather, commodity prices, and a dozen other variables beyond our control. I pointed out that I'd built something entirely my own, without relying on family connections or arranged business partnerships. When my dad realized I wasn't going to back down, he played his final card. He said that if I didn't marry Lauren, he would not only cut me from the farm inheritance, but he'd also make sure everyone in our agricultural community knew I'd abandoned family values and betrayed business partnerships. He threatened to damage my reputation in ways that could hurt my social media career. That's when I made my decision. I told him that if he wanted to prioritize business arrangements over his son's happiness and autonomy, then maybe I didn't want to be part of this family business anyway. I said I'd rather build my own legacy than inherit one that came with strings attached. The conversation ended with my dad storming out, and we haven't spoken since. My mom has tried to play mediator, but she keeps pushing the idea that I should just give Lauren a chance, and that marriage isn't about romance anyway. So here I am, Reddit. I've essentially been disowned by my family for refusing an arranged marriage in 2025. The crazy part is that I'm financially independent and probably more successful than I would ever be running the family farm, but I still feel this massive weight of guilt and loss. Am I crazy for walking away from generations of family legacy? Should I have tried harder to compromise? I keep second-guessing myself, even though I know marrying someone I don't love would have been miserable for both of us. Update. Well, things have gotten even more interesting since my original post. Thanks to everyone who commented with support and advice. Reading your responses really helped me feel less crazy about this whole situation. So about 2 weeks after our big confrontation, I got a call from my sister Claire. Apparently, word had gotten around our small town about the family drama, and she wanted to hear my side of the story. When I explained everything, including the arranged marriage ultimatum, she was absolutely furious. Claire told me she'd suspected our parents had some pretty outdated ideas about family obligations, but she'd never imagined they'd go this far. She said she'd been getting pressure for years to move back home and contribute to the family, but she'd always managed to deflect it by pointing out that I was clearly the heir apparent. But here's the kicker. Claire revealed something I'd never known. Apparently, when she first started college, our parents had tried to set her up with the son of another farming family in the area. They'd used similar tactics, talking about strengthening community ties and ensuring she stayed local. She'd managed to avoid it by getting a scholarship to a university 3 states away and basically creating enough distance that they couldn't control her choices. She encouraged me to stand my ground and offered to talk to our parents herself. I told her I appreciated the support, but I wanted to handle this on my own terms. A few days later, I got an unexpected call from Harold Brennan himself. He asked if we could meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. I was curious about what he wanted to say, so I agreed. The conversation was eye-opening. Harold started by apologizing for the way the whole marriage proposal had been handled. He said he'd assumed I was on board with the idea because my dad had presented it like I was enthusiastic about marrying Lauren. Then he told me something that completely changed my perspective on the situation. Apparently, our family farm is in much worse financial shape than my dad had let on. Harold's investment wasn't just helpful, it was literally keeping the operation afloat. Without his continued capital injection, the farm would likely go bankrupt within 2 years. Harold explained that the marriage arrangement wasn't really about me or Lauren. My dad had proposed it as a way to formalize their business partnership and ensure Harold's continued investment. He'd convinced Harold that combining our families would create a stronger agricultural enterprise that could weather economic challenges. But here's the thing that really surprised me. Harold wasn't actually that attached to the marriage idea. He said he'd only agreed to consider it because he respected my dad and wanted to help secure the farm's future. When he realized I wasn't genuinely interested in Lauren, he started having second thoughts about the whole arrangement. Harold told me he'd been watching my social media content for months and was actually impressed with what I'd built. He said he'd never seen someone explain agricultural concepts so clearly to non-farming audiences, and he thought my work was actually helping the entire industry by educating consumers about modern farming practices. Then he made an offer that completely blindsided me. He said if I was interested, he'd be willing to create a formal business partnership with me around my content creation. His company could provide equipment and location access for filming, I could create educational content featuring their products, and we could develop a revenue-sharing agreement that would be beneficial for both of us. The best part was that this partnership could also help stabilize my family's farm without requiring me to marry his daughter. Harold said he could structure the investment as a business arrangement with me personally, rather than a family-to-family deal that depended on marriage. I was stunned. Here was a solution that could potentially save the farm, advance my career, and get me out of the arranged marriage situation all at once. But I told Harold I needed time to think about it, especially since it would require me to reconcile with my dad who was currently not speaking to me. When I got home that evening, I found my mom Melinda waiting in my apartment parking lot. She looked like she'd been crying, and she asked if we could talk. The conversation with my mom was probably the most honest discussion we'd ever had. She admitted that she'd gone along with the marriage arrangement because she was scared about the farm's financial situation and didn't know what other options existed. She said she'd watched my dad become increasingly stressed and desperate over the past year as bills mounted and crop yields disappointed. But she also told me she'd been researching my YouTube channel and TikTok content after our big revelation. She said she'd had no idea how much work went into creating the videos or how much expertise it required to explain complex agricultural concepts in accessible ways. She admitted she'd been wrong to dismiss it as computer nonsense. My mom apologized for pushing the marriage idea and said she'd started to realize how unfair they'd been to both Lauren and me. She asked if there was any way we could work together to find a solution that would help the farm without requiring me to sacrifice my happiness. I told her about Harold's business partnership offer. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She said it sounded like exactly the kind of arrangement that could benefit everyone involved. But then came the hard part. She asked if I'd be willing to talk to my dad. She said he'd been miserable since our argument, barely eating or sleeping, and spending most of his time alone in the barn. She thought he was too proud to admit he'd been wrong, but she believed he'd be open to hearing about alternative solutions. I agreed to think about it, but I told her that any reconciliation would require my dad to acknowledge that he'd been wrong to try to control my life choices. I wasn't going to accept a half apology or pretend like the arranged marriage ultimatum had been reasonable. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about Harold's offer and my conversation with my mom. The more I considered it, the more I realized this could be an opportunity to build something bigger than just my individual success. I could use my platform to showcase sustainable farming practices, highlight family farming operations, and create content that actually benefited the agricultural community. But I also realized I needed to have a serious conversation with Lauren. Throughout this entire situation, she'd been treated like a pawn in business negotiations, and I thought she deserved to know what was really going on. I reached out to her and asked if we could meet for lunch. She seemed surprised but agreed. When we sat down together, I decided to be completely honest about everything: my successful social media career, my refusal to go along with the arranged marriage, and Harold's alternative business proposal. Lauren's reaction was not what I expected at all. She started laughing, not in a mean way, but like she was relieved. Then she told me she'd been dreading the marriage arrangement just as much as I had. She said she'd felt pressured by her father to go along with it, but she'd been hoping I would find a way out of the situation. It turns out Lauren had her own secret. She'd been seeing someone for the past year, a guy named Henry who worked as an environmental scientist for the state agriculture department. She hadn't told her father about the relationship because she knew he'd disapprove of her dating someone outside the farming community. Lauren said she'd been trying to figure out how to tell her dad about Henry and get out of the arranged marriage without damaging his business relationship with my family. She was thrilled to hear about Harold's alternative partnership proposal and said she'd talk to her father about it. We ended up having a really great conversation about our respective careers and goals. Lauren is actually brilliant when it comes to agricultural economics and sustainable farming practices. She's passionate about developing farming methods that are both profitable and environmentally responsible. By the end of lunch, we'd actually become friends. Lauren said she'd like to collaborate on some content about the economic aspects of sustainable farming, and I thought that would be great for my channel. So here's where things stand now. I have a potential business partnership that could solve multiple problems. I've gained a new friend and collaborator in Lauren, and my mom is supportive of finding alternatives to the arranged marriage. The only remaining obstacle is having a conversation with my dad. I've decided I'm going to reach out to him this week. I want to present Harold's partnership proposal and see if we can find a way forward that preserves family relationships while respecting everyone's autonomy. I'll update you all on how that conversation goes. Wish me luck, Reddit. Update 2. Okay, so the conversation with my dad happened, and it was intense. I'm still processing everything, but I wanted to share what went down because honestly, I need to get this out of my head. I texted my dad asking if we could meet at the farm to discuss some business opportunities. He responded pretty quickly, which told me he'd been thinking about our situation too. We agreed to meet last Saturday morning in his office. When I arrived, Henry looked terrible. My mom hadn't been exaggerating about him barely eating or sleeping. He'd lost weight. His hair was messier than I'd ever seen it, and he had dark circles under his eyes. For the first time in my life, my dad looked actually vulnerable. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes before he finally spoke. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking since our argument, and he wanted to understand my social media business better. He asked me to explain how it worked, who my audience was, and why I thought it was sustainable long-term. I spent about an hour walking him through my content strategy, showing him analytics, explaining my revenue streams, and demonstrating how I'd built relationships with agricultural companies for sponsored content. I could see his perception shifting as I talked. He started asking really detailed questions about production costs, time investment, and growth projections. Then I told him about Harold's partnership proposal. I explained how it could create a formal business relationship that would benefit the farm, advance my career, and eliminate the need for any arranged marriage. I emphasized that this solution would actually strengthen Harold's investment in our farm while allowing me to maintain my independence. My dad listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me why I hadn't told him about my success earlier. That's when things got really emotional. I told him honestly that I'd kept it secret because I'd never felt like he respected my interests or took my goals seriously. I said I'd always felt like he saw my technology interests as frivolous distractions from real work. Henry broke down completely. He started crying, which I'd never seen him do before. He said he'd been so focused on preserving the family legacy that he'd lost sight of what was actually best for his children. He admitted that he'd been scared about the farm's financial problems and had convinced himself that controlling my future was the only way to solve them. He apologized for trying to arrange my marriage and acknowledged that it had been wrong to threaten me with losing my inheritance. He said he'd been operating from fear rather than wisdom, and he'd almost destroyed our relationship in the process. Then my dad said something that really surprised me. He told me he'd actually been following my social media content for months without telling me. He'd created anonymous accounts to watch my videos because he was curious but too proud to admit it. He said he'd been impressed by my knowledge and teaching ability, but he'd been too stubborn to acknowledge it directly. We talked for another 2 hours about the farm's financial situation, my business goals, and how we might work together moving forward. Henry was completely honest about how close the farm was to bankruptcy and how much pressure he'd been feeling to find solutions. By the end of our conversation, we'd worked out a preliminary plan. I would pursue Harold's partnership proposal, which would provide capital injection for the farm while creating new opportunities for my content business. My dad would step back from trying to control my personal life, and we'd work together to develop a long-term strategy for the farm that incorporated both traditional farming and modern agricultural technology. The best part was that my dad said he was actually excited about the possibilities. He said he'd been so focused on doing things the way they'd always been done that he'd missed opportunities to innovate and grow. We shook hands and hugged, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were actually on the same team. But of course, the story doesn't end there. The next day, I got a call from Harold saying he'd heard from Lauren about our lunch conversation and her relationship with Henry the environmental scientist. Apparently, Harold had been much more open-minded about his daughter's romantic choices than she'd expected. Harold said he'd actually met Henry at several agricultural conferences and was impressed with his expertise in sustainable farming practices. When Lauren finally told him about their relationship, Harold's main concern was whether Henry was serious about her, not whether he fit some predetermined family business model. Harold invited Henry to dinner to get to know him better, and apparently, it went really well. Harold said Henry had innovative ideas about environmental compliance and sustainable practices that could actually benefit agricultural operations like ours. So now we have this emerging network of partnerships and relationships that's much more complex and interesting than the simple arranged marriage my dad had originally proposed. Harold and I are moving forward with our content creation partnership. Lauren and I are collaborating on educational materials about agricultural economics. Henry the environmental scientist is consulting with Harold's company on sustainable practices. And my dad is working with all of us to modernize our farm operations. It's been about 3 weeks since all these conversations happened, and things are going really well. My relationship with my parents is better than it's been in years. My content creation business is expanding in directions I never expected. And I'm learning tons about aspects of agriculture I'd never explored before. The weirdest part is that Lauren and I have actually become good friends. She's helped me understand the economic side of farming in ways that have made my content much stronger. And now that she's with Henry, she's much more relaxed and authentic. The four of us, Lauren, Henry, Harold, and I, have been meeting regularly to plan collaborative projects. My sister Claire visited last weekend and was amazed by how everything had worked out. She said she'd never seen our parents as happy and relaxed as they are now. She's also excited about potentially creating some educational content about the differences between rural and urban perspectives on agriculture. I keep thinking about how close we came to a completely different outcome. If I'd given in to the marriage ultimatum, Lauren and I would both be miserable, Henry would never have gotten to know Harold, and none of these collaborative opportunities would exist. I guess the lesson here is that standing up for your autonomy doesn't have to mean destroying family relationships. Sometimes it forces everyone to get creative and find better solutions than the ones they originally imagined. My dad and I had another long conversation yesterday about family legacy and what it really means. He said he'd realized that preserving the family name and business was less important than ensuring his children were happy and fulfilled. He told me he was proud of what I'd built on my own and excited to see how we could combine our different strengths. It's wild to think that 6 months ago, I was being threatened with losing my inheritance if I didn't marry someone I barely knew. Now I'm working on business partnerships that are more profitable and sustainable than anything my family had achieved before, and I'm doing it with the full support of everyone involved. I wanted to share this update because I know a lot of people were invested in how things turned out. Sometimes standing up for yourself opens doors you never knew existed. Sometimes the people who seem most resistant to change are actually just scared and looking for alternatives. And sometimes refusing to accept someone else's plan for your life leads to creating something much better than what anyone originally imagined. Thanks for listening, Reddit. This community support really helped me navigate one of the most challenging situations of my life. Final update. It's been almost 6 months since my original post, and I wanted to give everyone a final update on how everything has played out because the changes have been pretty remarkable. First, the business side of things has exceeded everyone's expectations. The partnership with Harold's company has not only stabilized our family farm financially but actually made it more profitable than it's ever been. My content creation business has grown to the point where I'm now managing a small team and working with agricultural companies across the country. The collaboration with Lauren has been incredible. We've created a series of educational videos about agricultural economics that have gone viral on multiple platforms. She's brilliant at breaking down complex financial concepts, and our audience loves learning about the business side of farming. She's actually started her own consulting business helping small farms develop sustainable business models. Lauren and Henry got engaged 3 months ago, and their wedding is planned for next spring. Harold couldn't be happier with his future son-in-law, and Henry has brought some amazing environmental perspectives to our collaborative projects. He's helped us implement sustainable practices that have actually reduced costs while improving soil health and crop yields. My relationship with my parents has completely transformed. Henry and Melinda are now my biggest supporters and regularly appear in my content. My dad has become genuinely interested in social media marketing and has started his own Instagram account showcasing daily farm life. It's pretty hilarious watching him figure out hashtags, but he's actually getting a decent following. My mom has become the unofficial farm photographer and videographer. She has a natural eye for capturing beautiful shots of the land and animals, and her behind-the-scenes content gets tons of engagement. She told me last week that she finally understands why I'm passionate about content creation. Claire visited for Thanksgiving and said she's never seen our family as cohesive and supportive as we are now. She's actually considering moving back to the area and starting a teaching program focused on agricultural education for urban kids. We're talking about collaborating on content that bridges the gap between rural and urban communities. The farm itself has been completely transformed. We've implemented precision agriculture techniques, sustainable farming practices, and educational programs that have made us a model operation in our region. We regularly host tours for other farmers, agricultural students, and urban visitors interested in learning about modern farming. I've been invited to speak at several agricultural conferences about using social media for farm education and marketing. It's surreal to think that what started as a hobby has become a legitimate career that's actually helping the broader agricultural community. But probably the most important change has been in family dynamics. We have weekly family dinners now where we actually talk about our goals, challenges, and successes. My parents ask for my advice on business decisions, and I genuinely value their experience and wisdom. We've learned to respect each other's expertise and contributions. Harold has become like a second father to me, and his business guidance has been invaluable as I've scaled my content creation company. He often jokes that the arranged marriage idea was the worst business decision he ever almost made, because the partnership we ended up with is much more profitable and sustainable. Lauren and I laugh about the arranged marriage situation now. She said she's grateful it happened because it forced all of us to have honest conversations about what we actually wanted from our lives and careers. We've become close friends and effective business collaborators. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized that what felt like the worst ultimatum of my life actually led to the best outcomes for everyone involved. By refusing to accept a future that had been planned for me, I created space for all of us to imagine better possibilities. I learned that standing up for your autonomy doesn't have to mean burning bridges or destroying relationships. Sometimes it means forcing the people you love to find creative solutions that work for everyone. The arranged marriage threat that seemed so devastating 6 months ago now seems like a blessing in disguise. It pushed all of us out of our comfort zones and into a much more collaborative and respectful way of relating to each other. My advice to anyone facing similar family pressure is to trust your instincts about what's right for your life, but also stay open to finding solutions that honor your relationships while preserving your autonomy. Sometimes the people who seem most controlling are actually just scared and looking for security in familiar patterns. And if you have talents or successes that you've been hiding from your family because you don't think they'll understand or approve, consider sharing them. You might be surprised by how supportive people can be when they actually understand what you're doing and why it matters to you. Thanks again to everyone who supported me through this journey. This community helped me feel less alone during one of the most challenging periods of my life, and I'm grateful for all the advice and encouragement. I hope this story encourages other people to stand up for their right to make their own life choices while still maintaining love and respect for their families. It's possible to do both, even when it seems impossible at first.